Today we are going to be doing this blue heron, and there's a couple options. We're going to do a very faded kind of soft background to it, but you can go in at a second stage and add some more greenery if that's what you want. I'm not a big fan of masking, so I probably will mask this. Just this part here, nowhere else will I mask it, and that's just because I want these to show in the, as though they're capturing the sunlight. There's a lot of sunlight on the back of the bird, the top of the head, even the branch here in the back of the legs. So if you want to mask, you could mask those parts as well, but I just don't think you'll get the same effect unless you're not as comfortable doing, you know, a wet wash on these parts. Then go ahead and mask it, and I'll show you how to kind of avoid the area where the mask is. So that's the plan. I did wet my paper, but I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to dry it off where I'm going to have the bird and where I'm going to put the masking. In order to do the masking on these parts, I'm going to use one of these nib pens. They're kind of like the old-fashioned dipping pens, making sure I get my prior masking off of here so that we have a nice even application. And basically, you can brush it on or just dip it in. I try to not dip it all the way up to that crack. And then basically it takes a minute for it to drop down. And then hard to see there because these are very fine lines, but that's essentially what it's going to do. Sometimes they come out in a blob, so the best thing to do is just make sure you don't go up to that line, and then apply your masking in thin lines like this. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to come out, to drop down entirely. Okay, so not much is coming out of there. I'm starting to see some. Just very faint lines is all I want anyway. So I can see a few there. Hard to see on the camera, but if you bob your head up and down, you can probably catch a glimpse of a few of them. So that's it for masking. And the nice thing about this is when you're done, you just let it dry off, or you wipe it with a Kleenex, and because it's metal, it comes off nice and easily. And at this stage, you can tape your paper down. I'm just going to, because I wetted on the other side, I'm just drying off these edges here, and now I'm going to tape it down. All right, so we're going to mix the colors for our background. I'm going to go with kind of a purpley tinge, and I'll see if I end up adding green or not. I'm not really sure whether I will, but it doesn't matter what colors you use for the background. You can mix any colors that you like that are, that's not working. I'll have to get my other thing, hang on. So much for that sprayer. Oh, and here's another, oh, here we go. I thought, here's another one that doesn't want to work, but I'm just spraying down my palette to wake up these paints. And then I'm going to take a couple of puddles of water and add them into my palette for the colors that I'm going to use. Okay, so I'm definitely going to go with some Imperial Purple in there, so let's throw that on. And then I think, so I want it to be a fairly thick mixture. That's pretty runny because I put a lot of water in there, but we've got a lot of background to cover. So there's no issue with it. I'm just going to tilt this a little bit further this way. There's no issue with it, you know, having too much paint. It's never really an issue. And then we're going to take some burnt sienna here. Now the bird itself is a nice cobalt or ultramarine blue. So, or maybe even some cerulean, who knows. So I'm going to also include that in there. And with the burnt sienna and the cerulean or cobalt, or maybe a combination thereof, you're going to get, you know, kind of a olivey green, I guess. So I'm just adding a lot of blue into this mixture. Bit of cobalt, bit of whatever. And if you want it warmer towards the bottom so that it does look greener at the bottom, you can use some greens. I think I'm going to stick with the ones with the cobalt tinge because I think they're more complementary to what we're going to do with the bird. So this time maybe we'll add that. I know when we started this in class, we didn't add any of the greens, but I think we'll do that this time. And I'm going to throw a bit more orange into that burnt sienna as well. So that's kind of our colors. Maybe a bit more blue here. And then we're just going to rotate through those as we go. Okay, so that's a mixture. Let's take this protector off. And then I find it's best to work in sections when you're doing this type of thing, when you're doing the background first. So we're going to start up here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just outline the bird. My pole is in the way a bit here. I'm using my dirty water, so there's a bit of a tint there. But I'm just making sure that I've got good coverage around the bird with just plain water. And I can start on this side because it's a smaller side. And just making sure that is all in there. And if you want, you can stop here and know that this was your end point, you know, right at the top of here. But that way you can do a section at a time. That's not as intimidating. The other thing is you don't have to cover the entire paper. You can leave blank spots, white spots. That always looks good. And then take the biggest brush you're comfortable with and use that to apply your paint. So I'm just going to go here. I've got this pole in the way, which is a bit of a pain in the butt, but so I'm going to apply all my paint out in this area. Actually, I don't want that much burnt sienna at the top. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with my smaller brush. And just go, this is where my water ended. So what I need to do is just put some water there, and we'll come back to that part a little later on. So I'm back to my small brush, and I'm going to do around this bird. Like so. I'm getting some green in there, which is interesting. I didn't really want green, but I think that's okay. And then here is where, just being very careful not to go into the beak, and you know, let those colors all kind of blend together. I want to point, oh, that's a good enough point, I think, there. And then back underneath, bit of purple. And this will probably be done in 2 phases. So this phase is all about getting the neck and so on identified. And a nice soft edge on that. Bit of burnt sienna again. Maybe a bit of burnt sienna up in there. And then I can go back over here. Bit of purple. Okay. And then here, I have to be very careful. Again, I'm on the edge, and I can see clearly that there's no water under here. Now this part is actually the black, so I'm not so worried about that. Maybe leave a little bit of white, more white on this side, because this is the side where the sunlight is coming from. So I'm just going to make sure this is nice and wet all the way down here. Go back over here. Now this is the part where we want the most contrast, right in here, because this part is glowing in the sun. So I'm going to just grab my bigger brush for a minute. Put that water on. Check my application on this side. Oops, I think I stuck my finger in there. Oops, sorry about that. I'm putting my head in. Okay, so just double checking that this is all lined up nicely. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then this is the area where I want to be a bit darker. So I can start with going into those colors. Add a bit of this cobalt here and there that I didn't put in before. Okay, going down. Okay, needs a bit of burnt sienna in there. Okay, just verify that it's wet all the way down where I need to go. So I'm just double checking, putting the paint in again. More blue up in this part maybe. Actually, I was going to leave some brightness there, which I can just drop some water in here and there to put that in. And then put some of this green down here. Cobalt here. Okay, I'm going to alternate with some purple, some burnt sienna. Okay. All right, and now I'm getting into a dry spot again. Down here. So some of this, the other thing you can do is if you want to shape it, so it looks a bit like reeds and stuff in the background, you can do that. Okay. Bit of burnt sienna. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to another area where we want high contrast. So that's right here. And I can see already that it's not wet down here. So I've got to wet that part all the way down. Okay, so high contrast. We want some blue in there. Now this is kind of an area where we may not want such a difference there. So what you can do here is just soften this edge, because that is part of the bird showing through there. So I'm wiping off my brush. I'm just softening that edge. Okay. A bit more of this. Okay, a bit more green in this area. And I can see I've already run out of wet paper here. Now this is the tree stump. And here, this is pretty much darker, except for that one area right there. So I am going to add lots of water, except for that area there. And then this thing can be highlighted as well. Okay, back to our color mixtures. Maybe a bit more burnt sienna, a bit more green down in this area. Okay. Okay. This is pretty dark except for the back of it. So I could leave a little bit of light still on the back of that. Just okay. All right, and then have a look at what you've got and decide whether it needs, you know, more water in a certain area. You can tilt your paper as well. That always helps things flow nicely. And then you could have these wreaths or weeds or whatever we want to call them kind of coming up. So I'm going in with the greens and making those come up a bit. It's still a very abstract background. Okay, and then here I'm going to do this. I'm just going to have a bit of a wipe out. I think I'm going to use this brush. Okay, this kind of, it's an effect to make it look like it's glowing out of there. Not sure if I'm going to like that, but maybe it looks too much like it's sticking out of his head, but something like that, I don't mind the look of it. And here, just soften this part out a bit. It seems to me it's a little rough. Okay, we'll see what that does. The other thing you can do is you can just give it a spritz here and there. Get the paint moving more. It's very light. I'm kind of okay with that. The parts that are the darkest are the parts that need to be. I just want to fix this line. It's a little uneven. I hold my baby finger down on the paper when I do that, and that helps understand your direction. I think I might do something at the bottom. I might just protect the top for a minute and protect the bird. And I'm thinking I need some spatters or something down here. I just think it needs to be more abstract in that area. Not worrying too much about this tree trunk because it doesn't have to be super dark. Yeah, I think that helps a little bit. I just needed something down there more, and maybe even a bit darker. So let's go a little bit darker. We'll take some cobalt and cerulean. And then combine all of the colors that I have here. I think that helps a bit. We'll see what it ends up looking like. The other thing that I notice is here around the beak, but because it's all purple and then all of a sudden it has but it's too late now, that part has already started to dry. Okay, we're back. It's dried. I actually had to iron it because it wrinkled. I put it in the sun, which is probably not a good idea. So anyway, it wrinkled a bit. I had to iron it, and now we're back. So our next step is to actually do a very light coat on the bird that will form the base coat of the neck, and go from there. So essentially we're going to be doing all this blue that you see here right down through the bird, maybe through his leg as well. So that is the goal. So for blue, I think it's probably best to stick with cobalt in this case. And I probably need to clean off my palette here. So let me do that. Okay, so I've mixed a cobalt and a bit of purple, and we're going to rotate through the two of those. So I'm going to start just with a clean brush, and what I want to do is just make sure that I've thoroughly wet all down his neck, because what I want to happen is I want the paint to run into that. So I'm just going to make sure that that is wet all the way down. Okay, and then over here, I'm leaving a tiny bit of a border there. Maybe get a bigger brush for down here. Okay, just make sure it covers everything there. And then here I'm not so worried about. There is a little bit of blue in these areas here. So I just want to make sure that they're wet as well. I'm not too worried about running into the beak. Checking my water, it looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is just take that cobalt. I think I'll start right in the middle here and just let it spread out into the wet spot that's there. And here I might add a little bit of purple. I see more purple up around this area, down under here. And then I'm just going to take some water, clean water, not my dirty water, and I'm just going to make sure that that can move out. I don't want to cross this line here, it's going to get dark if I have that go across. And I see a bit of purple kind of on the inside of this. Whoops, made a mistake. Cloth ready. Okay, so it ran into there already, which sometimes is a problem. Now I can push it back this way a bit so that that doesn't happen, but you have to be careful when that happens. Okay, and to me it doesn't look like it's wet enough over on this side here. Okay, but I think we might be okay. Tiny bit of purple in here. And I think there's quite a bit of purple in this area. Okay, and now I need to make sure it's wet the rest of the way down. So I'm just going to do that again. Pick up some more of my cobalt. And I'm kind of running out of cobalt, which is not good. I thought I picked a big enough pile. Okay, get all my cobalt in. Now here I want a soft edge, so I'm going to do the same. I'm going to just pick it up and push it back in. It may, you know, come drain out like that one did there, but I think I should be okay. This is all dark here, so it doesn't matter. And just paint, this leg will look blue in the end, so you might want to just carry that down a tiny bit and smush it out. Okay, and then we have blue all the way down here. I've got big pencil marks there, which is too bad, but, and then here is a bit more purple. So I can put some purple in there while I'm here. Okay, and then here, I just want to make it, this spot is a lot bigger than it was originally, but I just want to make sure I get some of that purpley color down in here too. So I'm using my whiteout brush, or my washout brush, to make sure I get those curves in. And then here, I can do some strokes that help it look like fur, or feathers, sorry. Okay, I'm leaving it purposely a bit light down here because I want to make sure I can get some of that white back in that part. We can fill this in with some purple too, mixed with the cobalt. That's a bit lighter there, so maybe I'll, and this kind of goes around the back, like so. Okay, and then we'll just drag that down again. And I think that's fine for now. That should do. We'll wipe out some there. Here we should soften it a little bit, just on the face. And I think that's about it. This part is very white right now, but that should do. And this part here is very white, so let's soften that out too. Okay, that's it for now. Now where it's bleeding, which is quite a few spots, you can try to just use a paper towel and dry that off a bit. But don't worry about it too much. We can get it when it's dry. And we have to fix these hard lines here anyway. So that's it for now.